We will start session 4. Thank you very much for staying after 4 in the afternoon. I'm Emmanuelle Vol. I'm working here at the ICM, and I'm a member of the Gender Equity Committee. And I'm very happy to start and introduce this last session today, especially because my work involves creative thinking, and this session will be about how gender diversity and inclusion can help improving creativity, innovation, and productivity and decision-making in individuals, in organizations, and importantly, under which conditions it can happen. So in this session, we have 3 amazing speakers that will approach this question with different perspectives. So Bahador Bahrami will address this question from a cognitive neuroscience perspective about collective decisions. Matthias Nielsen will ask the question about the social sciences and the effects of demographic diversity in science. And the last speaker, Maria, will have the economics perspectives and the effect of diversity and inclusion in organizations. We will begin with Bahador Bahrami. Bahador is from Iran. He got his PhD from Tehran University of Medical Sciences in 2003. And then he moved to London for a PhD in cognitive neuroscience. And since then, he has worked in Denmark and London, where he founded the Crowd Cognition Research Lab. And recently, in 2018, he moved his lab to Ludwig Maximilian Universitat in Germany, in Munich. So Bahador research focuses on the cognitive and neurobiological basis of interactive decision-making between human, but also recently human and artificial intelligence agents. So please welcome Worley Bahador, who will talk about inter-individual differences and collective accuracy.
Okay, so let's just get to the topic. I don't want to keep you further away from the reception and the cocktails as much as like we need to more than. Okay, so I work on collective decision making, and hopefully the idea that I will communicate to you today is that since we are in the creativity session and innovation, I want to communicate to you this take-home message that if we come up with creative structures for social interaction, we can harness and generate diversity of ideas that can be beneficial for our collective good. And if you agree with me on this by the end of the talk, I have made my point. So here is a this looks interesting, but here is a billboard from London Underground in 2012. It says, "Why work alone when you can collaborate?" It's an advertisement campaign from Skype, and its point is relatively obvious. Working together is better than working alone, and this software gives you the option to work together with others for free across the entire planet, so collaborate. Don't work alone. But if you look at the history of social sciences, psychology, behavioral sciences, and ask the question, is it really better to work with others, or should we just carry on working alone? You will see that the question does not really have a straightforward answer. If we ask, are groups more accurate than individuals, and we look at history, we will see that there is almost just as many elements, like people and serious scholars that would say yes as those who would say no. Popular wisdom is the same. We have 2 heads are better than 1 in the Bible. We have similar quotes in Quran. And we also have too many cooks spoil the broth. We have a similar thing in Farsi that has to do with cooking as well. It's interesting. Cooking seems to be a very individual kind of like passion. People don't seem to share the idea of collective cooking. But this slide is just meant to tell you that the answer and what that advertisement suggests is far from clear. We do not really know what makes collectives successful and what makes them fail, except for case by case and here and there. So this is Joaquin Navajas. Currently in 2024, he used to be a postdoc in our lab. Now he's the head of a neuroscience department in Buenos Aires in Argentina. And when he came to our lab, he started his work by asking, what is the impact of conversations, face-to-face conversations, on collective accuracy, and what can it do? And this is when he was there in 2017. This is when he actually did the work, together with Mariano Sigman and Tamara Niela in Buenos Aires. We set up a sort of collective experiment in a TEDx event in Rio de la Plata, which involved 6,000 people coming into the same stadium. And what we did was that we asked people to questions of general knowledge, which you will see those questions in a minute, and we assigned them according to their tickets places, like the placement of their tickets, into groups, like every 5 or 6 people here into one group, taking some care to make sure that people who are not familiar with each other would be happening to be in the same group. And we went through this kind of collective experiment, which happened like this. So these are the examples of the questions, like how many goals were scored into 2010 FIFA World Cup, or what is the height of Eiffel Tower in meters. Any guesses, anybody? Numbers? Okay. Sorry?
300 something meters.
Very good, very good, excellent. So if we had more samples, we would see that is actually quite close to the answer. But here's how the experiment happened. So Mariano went on the stage and asked the questions one at a time, those 12 questions. And first of all, we went through the 12 questions, one question after another, and we call this one the individual answers stage 1, in which every person answered the question on an answer sheet that was given to them in paper on the back of their tickets, and gave the answer to each question, individually, privately. Then, after that, for half of the questions, we went through a second round. These were what we will call discussed questions. For example, what is the height of Eiffel Tower? And this time we invited groups of 6 people, groups of 5, 6 people, to actually 5 people with a moderator, to discuss this among themselves, come to a consensus, and write that consensus. The moderator would write that consensus on their ticket. And then once we had done this collective stage, we went through the third stage, in which we asked the questions one time again, from beginning to the end, those that were discussed and those that were not discussed. And this time people gave if they had any revision to make, their revised answer. So we call them the stage I1, stage C, and stage I2. Okay, so here is the data from the stage I1. On the y-axis, I'm plotting the error of the responses normalized to the correct answer's magnitude. And on the y-axis, I'm plotting the number of individual opinions that I would aggregate with each other by averaging before comparing to the correct answer. And as you can see, as I take into account more and more opinions in my average, the error of the collective answer drops. The crowd becomes more and more wise as we integrate more and more opinions. This is nothing new. This is called wisdom of the crowds. We have known this since the French Revolution by the works of Marquis de Condorcet and Francis Galton in London. So here is basically a classical finding. What we found in our data was, let's just go through this once again. So this is the error of the individual, and this is the error of the crowd when you get, for example, 5,000 people. You get to reduce the error by simply averaging the opinions of everyone before comparing to the correct answer. Okay, now, what happened in the experiment, as I just explained, was that we had that period in which we had groups of 6 people talking to each other and coming to a consensus. Now, we could take those consensus opinions and average them with each other and see if those consensus opinions come to a different sort of wisdom of crowds. And when we do that, we get this. Look, here I have one group of 5 people, average error, compared to 5 people averaged individually and then compared to the correct answer. And over there, a group of 5 and 5 people individually are kind of similar. But then, as we get bigger and bigger groups, by the time we get to 4 groups of 5 people, we have outperformed 1,400 people's opinion. So that, I think, is magical. It shows you exactly that element of creativity and innovation in social structure. If you have a structured way of giving a question to people, having them talk to each other, then average their consensuses, you don't need 1,400 people. You can just get a lot better by having 20. And then by the time you get to the same number of people, your error has massively decreased. So, but how does this happen? This looks almost like magic, right? Because these are the same people. The only thing that we have done is that these are the consensus opinions, and these are the individual opinions. Now, and this is, of course, the summary of the same thing. But what I'm going to describe to you next is the statistical structure of what happened, what we observed in the data. But, and if you're interested in seeing how we have demonstrated that, I can send you the paper, or you can look up the paper, Joaquin's work. But here I will just describe it to you schematically using some cartoons. So let's say this is our one-dimensional opinion space for the question, what is the height of Eiffel Tower in meters? Going from, let's say, about 100 to 600, and this would be and 300, as was the guess, is somewhere in the middle. Now, we have a few people. I have color-coded them to indicate that they belong to different groups. And I ask them the question individually, and as individuals do, they happen to randomly disperse along the opinion space. What we saw in the data is that when the consensus step happens, some interesting structure starts to shape in the opinions, which I have, you see this in this animation now. And the first thing that happens is that talking to each other decreases the within-group variance. You can see this, for example, by saying that the red people here on the opinion metric are widely distributed. And then after talking to each other, they kind of converge to each other, right? And similarly for the green people and for the blue people. This is, again, another social psychology famous finding. We call this herding. People who are in the same group herd to each other. They converge to each other's opinion. There's also another phenomenon that we observe, and that is that the overall distribution of opinions widens up. The variance, the disagreements between groups increases. And this is called polarization, right? And what we have is that local face-to-face conversation that does something interesting to the inter-individual differences. To repeat, within group variance decreases, and between group variance increases. There is both herding and polarization. And I will get back to that, but what I want to say is that this phenomenon that we see here is not restricted to questions of trivia, such as, for example, what is the height of Eiffel Tower? Most recently, we have done this experiment about matters of preference. And in this experiment, what we did was that we asked people about, would you share your personal data with government or with private companies and so on. And we asked 2 different cases of when browsing the web and cookies, or for example, when you're moving around your geolocation. And what we see in both cases, in these cases is also similar. These are the data from the questions that were not discussed. And you can see that the dispersion of opinion before and after, if we just ask people to think again, is not particularly different. But for questions that have been discussed, after discussion, the intergroup or the range of opinions increases. People start to have opinions that before conversation, they didn't. And so what it does is that we have this, that the phenomenon, that group deliberation creates more diversity of ideas across people when we have this interesting local structure of local conversations and then global averaging. So what can we take away from this? I think if we look back at the history of social psychology and memes in internet, such as this one, and our popular understanding of what is good and what is bad in human psychology, herding is not one of those that we like. We think that people herd with each other, they follow each other blindly, and they do things just because other people agree with them. We also like follow them, and we think of herding as a stupid mechanism of social interaction that we should fight against. We always tell people that you should have your own ideas, you should resist being influenced by others, etc., etc. We also think that polarization and echo chambers are a bad thing. When people are in their own echo chambers, when they only hear what those who agree with them keep saying, what happens is that they become extremized, they go to one or the other extreme. This creates divisions and things of that sort. I hope what I've shown you is that if we are innovative about the structure of social interactions that we put in place, then we can actually create situations in which herding within groups and polarization across groups paradoxically creates a much enhanced wisdom of crowds that is both efficient and successful. Here, again, I repeat, here we have 4 groups of people sampled randomly from the same from the same population as here, that outperformed the collective wisdom of the entire 1,400 people. And with that, I bring this to an end, because I think this is, hopefully I've made my point. I showed you 2 empirical experiments, and what I want to say is that diversity, one of the key important factors in diversity is diversity of our ideas and what we think and our disagreements with other people. And I also want you to remember that by having by encouraging conversations with others, we can actually encourage this kind of diversity of ideas, and it can be very helpful for us. Thank you.